Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude Beyond Mystic, and welcome to this very special episode. Today's title is Nostradamus and the Vortex of Time. With me today are two very distinguished guests. You can find the first one here, Jay Weidner at Reality Check here on YouTube, and also on his website at jweidner.com. Jay, welcome back to the show. How are you?
It's great to be back. Thank you.
Excited to have you on. And folks, of course, the amazing Julie from Maison Jupiter here on YouTube and also on the web at maisonjupiter.com. Julie, welcome back to the show.
Hey, everybody. Hello, you too. Nice to be here.
I'm so excited. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here on this live interactive show. We're going to have a wonderful conversation today about how all of this seems to be tying in together. We're going to go in the past and look at some of those Nostradamus prophecies. We're going to look at some of these other predictions, including the one from Rudolph Steiner. And we're going to also be looking at this context and the setup here in the astrology for the fall, which is the Saturn Uranus square. So that ultimate battle here between the Piscean and the Aquarian age, all this in one episode. So thank you guys. I will be bringing your comments on during the show, and if we have time, we'll try to get some questions here added up to the end of the show. Jay, before I start, the last time you were here, we had a wonderful conversation about your amazing book here, The Mysteries of the Great Cross of Henday. Can you, for the audience members who might not have seen that show that was on my previous YouTube that was deleted, kind of remind them how some of the archaeology and some of the architecture in the Fulcanelli's book here, Le Ministère des Cathedrals, was referring to this cyclic cataclysm here on the planet and what the elites do at the end of those cycles. Let's start there, Jay.
Well, basically, Fulcanelli wrote a book. It came out in 1926 called Mystery of the Cathedrals. It caused a big stir in the alchemical circles of France. There was only 300 copies made, so it was a very rare book. But in the 50s, they decided, because we now could print paperbacks and stuff, they brought it back out, but it had an additional chapter, which the original didn't have. And that chapter is on the cyclic cross of Henday, or Undai, or whatever. I just do it, I pronounce it in the English way because I don't want to confuse anybody. But so anyway, this cross, Fulcanelli tells us, is about the end of time. And if you translate the cross correctly, the symbols on the cross, you will understand in great detail about the nature of the cataclysm at the end of time. So I got really involved in that. And starting in 1986, I spent decades literally tracing down everything about it and reading everything and talking to people. And basically, the cyclic cross of Henday is saying that at the end of the great year, the 25,920 year cycle, we have an explosion from the sun, a gigantic solar flare, CME, that causes gigantic plasma strikes here on Earth, that wreaks havoc and kills nearly everything on the planet. And this is a normal event. It happens all the time. It's talked about in the Vedic texts, talk about it openly, talk about it. The Aztecs did their sacrifices to satisfy the sun from not getting angry because it got angry the last time. And so what I believe is that but the cross is describing is a double catastrophe. So what happened the last time this happened, which was a little over 12,000 years ago, we got hit a double whammy. First, we had a gigantic comet come in, break up into 4 gigantic pieces first, and then into hundreds of pieces, and hit Canada and North America, creating all the lakes, by the way, that are in Canada. And that caused a nuclear winter, which threw us into the Younger Dryas, a 1,200-year-long freeze-out that nearly killed everything on Earth. Especially anything north of 20 degrees, because mercilessly cold. And then the solar flare happened 1,200 years after the comet, which is the second part of the catastrophe, and that melted all the ice that was created in the Younger Dryas, and almost instantly melted all the ice. It happened really fast, and so. If you know the work of Randall Carlson, gigantic streams of water came down through Canada, down through Washington State and the Columbia River. And I mean, we're talking 5 times bigger than the Amazon River, that much water. And, and all over North America, you can see the traces of this double catastrophe. And so, when does it happen? Well, even Jesus said, no man will know when this thing will happen. So I don't know when it will happen, but I can tell you this, the elites are preparing for it and have been preparing for it ever since 1957 when the book came out. And we know that Fulcanelli was chased all around France by the OSS, the precursors to the FBI, and because he had nuclear secrets. And all alchemists have nuclear secrets. That's what's all part of the game. And so, he was on the run, and he finally, I think, probably escaped to South America in the 30s to get away from all the scrutiny. And because alchemists go to jail. This is what happens. I mean, history is replete with alchemists accidentally telling someone that they know something, and then the king arrests them because they want to get it, and then you never hear of them again, right?
They're often in the king's favor until they're not, right? And then they get a quick visit to the dungeon. Okay, let me bring that up here, folks. If you guys are looking for the Mysteries of the Cathedrals here by Fulcanelli, this is one of the versions here you can find on paperback on Amazon. Really, really interesting read. I have the French version of that too, Le Mystère des Cathedrals. You'll see the blue cover if you're looking for that. And of course, Jay Weidner's book here is The Mysteries of the Great Cross of Henday, The Alchemy and the End of Time. So, Jay, specifically on this end of time thing here, what you're saying here is that the elites, of course, know this. We are obfuscated from a lot of this occult data, but bring it back also. You mentioned the Incas earlier, but I want you to go even further into some of these yugas. Again, for the audience members who might not have heard our previous show on this, explain how there are secret societies here on the planet who understand this very well and plan for these different cycles. And we're at one of those critical junctures here. And what also the elites usually do during this critical juncture, that will set the stage also for the rest of the conversation here today. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah. So, if you know your like alternative archaeology history, you know that particularly the French are funding guys going all over the world looking for stuff, right? And Germans too, but particularly French. They're part of a project, I call it Project X. And it started, I believe, at least with Napoleon. I believe that's when Project X started his trip to Egypt. Began a funding of an occult secret underground research group that is looking into everything. Mm-hmm. And I believe that they are obsessed with this idea of the end of the world and the end of the Iron Age and keeping themselves alive during it. The one thing I can tell you, because of my interest in alchemy, I have gotten to meet a lot of very wealthy people. They want to know my secrets, or whatever. And I don't have any secrets. So so I meet them, and I can tell you the one thing that they're more interested in than anything besides making money is keeping alive, staying alive. They spend tons and tons of their money, especially when they get in their 60s and 70s, staying alive, basically, and dreaming of living to be 120 and 130 or even beyond that. And maybe some of them achieve it. I know that the people on Silicon Valley are spending billions of dollars right now in life extension. So it's a big thing. So what they want to do is survive the coming catastrophe. In the Vedic texts, they clearly say that, and there's no doubt, it clearly says that at the end of the last Kali Yuga, right before Brahma exploded the sun, they built giant arcs and went to a planet called Mahar, Mahar, Mahar. And they went underground on Mahar, and they waited it out until the earth had everything was burned up on the earth, and then they brought back all the genetic material, the seeds, all the stuff that they had saved. That's why Gates has his seed bank up in Norway. That's what they're doing. If you look at every single thing they're doing, you will understand that this is what they're doing. and they're taking all the precautions. The deep underground military bases started building right after Fulcanelli's book came out in the 50s. They also began the secret space program in the 50s. And again, what's the secret space program? It's a way to get off the planet in secret. Why would you want to do that? Well, I don't know. I guess because they think there's a catastrophe coming. And so what they're doing right now is they're trying to create a type 3 civilization here on Earth. They're trying to create a type 2, so we are type 3. They're trying to create a type 2 civilization, and they're trying to synthesize everything on the planet. And everything is going to be under their control, your thermostat, your calorie intake, how much gas you burn, everything. This is the plan. The plan is to put everything under the auspices of their control, so that they can move whenever they want to move without us hindering them. And this is what what's his name? Elon Musk is always talking about, going to Mars. Right. I think Mahar is Mars. I think that Mars is the escape hatch for the elites. And they go there, and they were probably dark skinned when they left, whenever this was the last time, and they lost all their pigment. And they came back, and they started creating a civilization back on Earth again. And all of this happened, like 10,000 years ago or so. I believe that's when they came back after the last catastrophe. And it's a periodic thing. It happens over and over and over and over. And they know it. They're very much more advanced than we are. The older I get and the more I study these guys, the more I realize that they understand astrology better than any astrologer I've ever known. They understand history better than anybody I ever know. I'm talking about the very top elite people, the very top of the Masonic orders in the world. These guys are very, very advanced, and they're women too, and they're very advanced. They have incredible parapsychological powers and the ability to influence whole societies using just their thought forms. And they may even have their own country somewhere out in the South Pacific or something, where it's not on the maps, so that they can, get away from all of us. I don't know, but I entertained these things in the past, but now I no longer entertain them. I now think that actually we are living on a planet with people who may be 300 or 400 years old, and they live here among us.
There seems to be evidence of that also. If you look at, I'm going to bring this up also for another reason here, but Anatoly Fomenko's this series of books here talks about perhaps a manipulation in our timelines. And that's very interesting for the conversation today. Of course, we're going to look at the vortex of time here with some of the Nostradamus stuff. But going back to this Yuga age, for a lot of us preparing here and for the elites, is it possible that if you look at that Fomenko work, that the timelines have been manipulated in our view for the plebeians, for the normals, so that we don't know exactly when these particular changes are happening? What are your thoughts on that, Jay?
Bingo. Exactly right. 100%. That's what they're doing. And they mess with the timelines. So we think we're in one time period, but actually we're 1,000 years further back. The great mystery, of course, is that if you go to the year 400 AD, right, and you look at the ships, the weapons, the building materials, how things were built, and then you go to 1400 AD, 1,000 years later, the ships are exactly the same. The weapons are exactly the same. The way you build buildings is exactly the same. There's no advancements on anything on any level from 400 to 1400. It's impossible. That's not possible. I don't know what the truth of the matter is. I'm looking into it. There's all sorts of hidden possibilities. I think I said on your show before, I have a book in my library, magazine from 1859, American Archaeology magazine. And it says right there's an article in that magazine that says that in 1859, that there were temples that rivaled Abydos here in America. There were gigantic structures and all sorts of stuff was here long before the Europeans ever arrived.
Yeah.
So, it's very possible that a super advanced civilization, like say the Phoenicians, came here and made friends with the Native Americans and built settlements and cities. And when the Europeans arrived, they just stumbled onto them, pretty much. And even Quebec, where you guys are, where you guys live, Quebec has a strange and odd history, and the Great Fire and the whole thing. It's just, I don't know. It's a big mystery, and I'm going to uncover it. Maybe I'll start studying my Nostradamus again, see if he left a clue.
Well, there's clues in that, and we're starting this series also here on Nostradamus on the show. We're not sure we're going to be able to do all of them here on YouTube because of some of the weird censorship going on. And on that note, guys, while we're here, can you please go over to Reality Check here on YouTube and give Jay here a like and a subscribe also. We're trying to bump up these numbers also for him.
Please.
So he's got amazing content there, so please do go and check it out. And while you're at it, also mosey on over here to Maison Jupiter, where Julie is also producing some really, really cool astrological content there as well. Kimberly was asking, hey, can you repost that book? So yes, there's 3 things we're talking about here. So let me just do that. And guys, just take a quick screen grab if you want. Mysteries of the Cathedrals was the first one. Jay's book here, The Mysteries of the Great Cross of Henday. And the last one was the Flamenco series. Let me see if I can have that back on the screen for you guys here. This here is what you're looking for. Julie, thank you for bearing with us and all of this. You've been studying here in the last number of years the astrology, but just recently you've been guided by source here to explore Nostradamus. And what was interesting, just a little while ago, Naughty Beaver, who's another Canadian content producer, picked up this old reading that Janine Morigeau had done, basically channeling Nostradamus here a couple of years ago, and reposted a few things and see how all of this is timing into our landscape right now. And you were guided to pick up a book. Explain that to the audience and why we're doing the show today. And then we'll get into 2 specific quatrains that we want to see if we can tie in both with the Great Cross of Henday, but also Jay's wide experience and knowledge and all things occult. Julie, how did you get started on this?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story. I picked a card, an oracle card, and it said to open up a book and that book would have the answer I'm seeking. And I kind of forgot about it. And then the next day, I felt guided to open up a book that I've never opened up before. And it was that book, The Nostradamus by John Hogg. And it's a pretty big book, as you can see, that was gifted to me by my sister. But at the time I received it, I was like, Nostradamus, okay, thank you. But I didn't express any particular interest in Nostradamus before that. So I heard his name a couple of times in a few days. So I was like, okay, let me open that book. And I felt guided to open up towards a specific page and a specific area in the page. So I didn't know much about him at that time. So I was guided to a particular quadrant that we'll reveal in just a bit. And then I was like, JC, do you know something about that? Because usually when I have something I'm wondering about, like JC has a lot of explanations for me that it spares some time of research. So I asked him, and he was like, well, actually, Naughty Beaver did a decode on that pretty recently, I believe. So I watched a video with Janine, and then I learned he was talking a lot about astrology, and so it was like a big revelation to start looking into it. So I felt.
Let me just say here too. Also, when Janine did her reading, channeling Nostradamus in this particular video, she also repeated something, and she knew nothing about this at the time. Somebody else was prompting her all these questions, but she was also repeating something that Dolores Cannon had said, that some of these Nostradamus prophecies were not meant yet to be decoded, and that they would be decoded in the future, probably by somebody with knowledge of astrology. So here comes Julie, our amazing astrologer. So Julie, let's talk about this particular quatrain here, the first one, and let's set that
so
up
that's
for
the one I was guided towards, and I didn't know it was like a pretty well-known quatrain. So keep in mind that it was written in French, and there is a couple different translations in English. So sometimes the words are not that precise, but it says the world near the final period, Saturn again will make a late return. The empire is transferred towards the broad nation, the eye plucked out at Narbonne by a hawk. So it kind of struck a chord because the first, if you can go back to, we're having a bit of echo.
Let me just mute.
Okay, thanks. If we go back to it, when I first read the first line, the world near the final period, I immediately thought about this Saturn-Uranus square that we're having at the moment, which is the last square of the whole cycle between Saturn and Uranus. And for me, it represents globalism, this will to centralize everything. And also it has to do with what Jay was saying earlier, this digital ID that they're trying to move us into, and to control our energy, our consumption, everything about us, but also our identity. So I was thinking about this final square, so it kind of brought me back to it. And at the present moment, we're experiencing a very strong influence of that last Saturn-Uranus square. And it's going to be almost exact on October 4th. And it's the last time we're going to feel this square that heavy. And well, basically, for people that don't really know much about it, it's pretty much a clash between the old world and the new world. Saturn being the planet that represents the old world, or the ruling powers. And then we're going to talk about it later too, but it also represents time, being bound to time, Saturn. Right. So the clash between old world and new world, Uranus representing this like rebel alliance type of energy, wanting change, revolution, a more equal distribution of resources. That is Uranus. It's the maverick, the rebel. And also trying to get back our personal power. So there's a high tension between those two forces at the very present time. And because it's the last time we're going to feel it this fall, so it's kind of a breaking free from this constraint, if you will. And also because the North Node conjuncts Uranus. So North Node represents our collective karma, what we're moving towards collectively in order to, grow spiritually. So we're moving more towards Uranus. So decentralization of the powers, freeing ourselves from the powers that be, or the powers that were, depending on how we see it.
So essentially what you're saying is universe has stacked the deck towards Uranus here. So the bad guys' time is up here, so to speak. And that's why perhaps they're freaking out and they're trying to accelerate a lot of those plans. Very quickly here, Jay, I see you nodding. Do you want to chime in on this here before we go a little bit more into the decode itself? What do you want to share on this Saturn-Uranus square? You had mentioned in the last show, the last fight between the Pisceans and the Aquarians.
Explain that's what this is.
Yeah,
this is the fight. The Saturns are the Pisceans clinging on to their life and their what they've created for 2,000 years, and the Uranians, or whatever you would call them, they're on the forces of Aquarius, and they're breaking free, and you see that battle going on, all across the world right now, and the destruction of the supply chain. That is the decentralization. That's the first aspect of what I call the great decentralization that's coming. We're not centralizing, we're decentralizing. We're going to use the tools that they think they're going to use to control every aspect of our lives. We're going to use those same tools to decentralize.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. Much agree. And also, interestingly enough, Uranus in the sign of Taurus, I'm using tropical astrology, which is more connected with the Earth and the Sun relationship. So Uranus in Taurus has to do a lot with natural cataclysm and climate change. Well, not climate change as is being brought by the media, but more like big changes in the earth with, let's say, earthquakes. It could be also all sorts of cataclysms. So
Earth changes.
New continents
Earth
going
changes.
and coming, maybe. Jay, I'll get you to chime in on perhaps that lost continent that is actually not lost. We'll get into that maybe a little bit later on the show. Okay, Julie, let's go back into
Yeah, if you can just go back to the slide before, so I can just finish.
right, and then we'll get into Dolores's interpretation of
Yeah.
it too and see how that ties in. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, and then it says, second line, Saturn again will make a late return. So I immediately thought about some kind of organization or country that would have his Saturn return. But the word that was bugging me at first was again. So meaning there's another Saturn return. So I looked at a couple charts from different organizations and countries. And then I found that the European Union were having their first Saturn return right as we're speaking. So, and I'm pretty sure he's talking about Europe there because he's talking about Narbonne, which is a French city. And so it seemed like it was very much centered around Europe. So European Union charts would make sense to me. And then in the Dolores Cannon's interpretation of that quatrain, she said that he was referring to Saturn being retrograde. And then I understood that they had their first Saturn return in April of this year, the EU, and then Saturn went retrograde. So it's still retrograde right now as we speak. And then in January of next year, it's going to hit again the exact place to make a Saturn return. So it's like the second hit of that Saturn return. So that would make sense since he used the word again. Then third line, the empire is transferred towards the broad nation. So there's many interpretations of that one, but I'm thinking more of this new world order evil empire as it makes its transition to this age of Aquarius, where decentralization, broad, is also spelled differently in English, but it makes me believe there's a connection there. And also, fourth line, it says, the eye plucked out at Narbonne by a hawk. And then this one, I was very puzzled about it. I was thinking about maybe he's thinking about the all-seeing eye, this power, but then it brought me to reading more of Dolores Cannon book, and that was an amazing synchronicity because I received an email from someone in the community. You gotta read that book. Well, there's 3 in total, and then JC sent me the cover for that episode that we're doing right now, and the same morning that I got this email, and then I already ordered the book, and they just arrived by mail the same morning. So that was like a series of synchronicities. I was like, okay, I'll read it. So I did. And then we can go ahead and just read the second slide.
Okay, let me bring that up. The thing about, let me bring that up also. I'm excited to what you're going to say here with respect to Dolores's interpretation. But just recently also, Putin, who in the Webbot data, in Edgar Casey's prophecy, was said that Russia would eventually save the world. And here he is, and this is a falcon. But somebody reminded me that in Ukrainian and in Russian, the word for this bird is a hawk. It's the same word. So I was like, okay. So is he plucking the eye of the all-seeing eye here? That makes sense also. Jay, quickly on that, what are your thoughts here before we go to the next slide?
Well, I think if I remember my history right, wasn't Narbonne the Jewish empire in southern France?
It was an old Italian port, and it has a bunch of these labyrinths of tunnels, and a lot of people are saying, "Hey, right."
Yeah, there's like it's actually a very special place.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out what the Eye of Narbonne is, but it does have an incredible history, and I'm sure Nostradamus was very familiar because he was Jewish, and I do believe that. I do believe there was a Jewish, actually an independent country in that area, like in maybe 700, 800 AD, that was eventually vanquished by the church, but it was there for a short time. So I don't know.
Wow. Okay,
Wow.
that's another lead to follow here. Okay,
Yeah.
Julie, let me bring that second slide for you to run through here with the audience. Go ahead.
Okay, so I found the pages. Well, Dolores Cannon in her book, she's putting someone into trance to communicate with Nostradamus. So she's having messages through a channel to help us decipher the quadrants, basically. So these are what pertains to the quadrant. So he says that in this quadrant, he's referring to a period of time in which there is a war, and the event happens near this end of this war at the final stages, when Saturn is again late, so late retrograde. He says that statement has a double meaning. On the one hand, it refers to an astrological event of Saturn being in retrograde to help narrow down the time involved. So I think this EU second Saturn return is to give us more of a time reference, because Saturn is the planet of time. So this line is more like to give us an indication on when the prediction is going to happen. And then it also refers to some of the technology in this war. So I believe we're already in this war. I don't think he's talking about something that's ahead of time. In this war, as in all wars, there are great advances done in research of science, both weapons research and things like that. In this war, the scientists are researching how to warp and alter time to help change some events, to swing the war over to their advantage. And they have failed yet again. As a result of this second failure, the entire complex is destroyed in a large catastrophe. That's the eye being plucked out by a goshawk. Some translations say goshawk, others say hawk, because they are dealing with powers they don't know how to control, and it rips them apart. What happened was that the vortices of energy they are trying to deal with were not fine-tuned enough to work with, and they got out of control. So far as the catastrophe is concerned, it will be very localized and will have some strange side effects in the dimension of time in the general area there. It will eventually have far-reaching effects because the government was counting on that line of research to give it an edge in the war. And some of that edge is taken away, and it will end up affecting the outcome of the war, the third war. So pretty much what we're in.
Yep.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Jay, do you want to chime in here? There's a couple of things I want to bring up. I see you nodded. What do you want to add?
No, go ahead. I think you're right. We are in that war. We're in the war right now, and it's a weird war, and not a standard kinetic war. We're not in the kinetic. Well, no, we may have gotten into the kinetic war now that the gas line was sabotaged. So that could be and you know, we're pretty much. Sorry, we know who did it. You know.
I played a video last night on my uncensored pay-per-view of President Biden saying, of course, that if so-and-so would attack, that they would deal with the pipelines. I'm like, you heard it from the horse's mouth before the fact, so you don't have to look too hard. But what Jay's saying also here was very interesting in this last rally, and we'll choose our words here carefully. But if you look at the flag here behind them, we were told that this meant really at this point, we were in the open warfare part of this particular engagement. So a lot of people on our chat who are military oriented commented on that as well. And it was interesting also that you kind of see the stripes here as gold and silver, perhaps alluding to this new financial system also being bimetallic. So there's a lot there in that symbology, and time will tell here. But I think Jay's right here. We are now in that last stage, and it's also in public view to some extent, at least for those of people who are searching and not necessarily watching the 6 o'clock news.
Well, now, you got to remember that this war is not like a war between countries. This is like a civil war all over the world. And it's the war between the Aquarians and the Pisceans. It's a war between centralization and decentralization. It's a war between the WEF and the people who just want to be left alone. And in order to facilitate this thing, us Aquarians have got to get going. We can't just sit around and just think that because time is coming our way that this is all going to happen. No, we have to We have to start forming communities, find our tribes, start growing our own food, taking care of ourselves, learning how to do medicine. We're going to lose it all. It's all going to go away. You're not even going to be able to, gas is going to be $15 a gallon. You're not going to be able to go to the hospital. So this is where we're headed. And the Pisceans are actually being very militaristic right now and authoritarian, kind of surprising actually. But that's what happens when you corner a dog. And
sometimes when you push too far, it's this far and no further. You wake up the sleeping giant. I think it was the line from World War II here with Japan. Let's bring this up here. Also, when I created this poster originally, I didn't have a title, and I heard a hard voice, "The Vortex of Time," and I was like, "Oh, okay, that sounds good." And only that day did Julie send me this particular part of the interpretation where they talk about these vortices of energies being used, and right here, and the control of time. Now, is it possible, Jay, that we're already, and Julie also, seeing some of these effects here? A lot of people have mentioned for the last number of years this Mandela effect, where time seems to have been warping. The reality is one thing for one part of the population, it's something else for another part of the population. And also, I just wanted to mention something. When you said this particular engagement, I'll say engagement for now, just to not trigger too much of the algos with the bad words. But in this particular engagement, like Claude was saying on his videos too, it's no longer one king pitting his soldiers against another king's soldiers. No. This is the king against their own soldiers. That we're seeing this across the country, across the world, where country states are actually fighting their own citizens. That's the nature of what we're looking at. But Jay, on this idea of Mandela effect, what would you say to that? Is that part of this? Maybe
the Mandela. Well, the Mandela effect is a weird thing, but we also have to remember that with technology, people can screw with stuff too. So, I mean, George Lucas is infamous for screwing with the Star Wars films, adding new clips and new things, and really that's kind of really confuses the issue a lot. But there are weird things. I mean, definitely the Jaws from the Bond film. Moonraker. I mean, I remember that film when it came out, and the girl had braces on, and the whole point of the joke is that she has braces on, and then the guy with the silver teeth, they fall in love with each other and they walk away into the sunset. That's the whole point. But now her braces are gone. Why would they remove the braces? I have no idea, but the movie doesn't make any sense without it. So there is a strange thing going on. There's no doubt about it. And but what's really going on here, and you guys were talking about it so good, is that the only way that the Piscean world could function is through Saturnian time. That we have to all agree to meet at the airport at certain times. So we take the plane. We got all this stuff that we had, and so the control of time was essential to the Piscean age. But COVID came, and we all shut down, and that gave the Aquarians the inch that they needed to have to get in there, and so all of a sudden we started preaching. I mean, I did. I think all the Aquarians were saying, work twice as much at home, make your output twice as much. So that when the guy at work, when they want to bring you back, you say, no, I'm doing more than my share. I want to stay home. Right. And the same thing with the truck drivers. The reason that the supply chain is screwed up is nobody wants to drive trucks anymore. It's a seriously hard job. It's 14, 15 hours of dangerous work every day. You're on the road. You never see your wife or kids. And then, you got to stay home for a year, and then you're like, this is pretty nice. I don't think I want to go back. And so nobody's going back to work. And so the Aquarians are winning. I know the chaos could look scary, but chaos is also, those cymatics where they take the sand and they put a frequency, and when they change the frequency, the sand all gets confused before it forms into another geometry. And we're in that confused state right now, in between, where they're changing the frequencies, and then that's the signs are changing. That's the frequency changing, and so everything's confused. But the Aquarians all know they're cool, man. They're cool. But chaos can be fun. Chaos can be good, but you have to prep for it. So Aquarians are more prepared than the Pisceans, because Pisceans keep thinking that the same thing is just going to keep occurring. The supply chains are never going to break down. The food's always going to be here, and that's not what's going to happen. And
my money's safe in the bank, and my retirement fund is absolutely safe. Don't worry, everything's good.
And it's not true. And so, you know, where I live, we're forming a community that's taking care of each other, you know, and everybody, it's possible. It's not impossible. The number one thing you should be using the internet for is to find people that live in your area that think like you do, and then have meetings and exchange things and ideas, and protect yourself from the forces of the Piscean forces, mostly, who are now becoming authoritarian, and as they're losing their grip on reality.
So you can find people like-minded in your community, but if they're not close by, you can always find them online here at Reality Check on YouTube, and also at Maison, where we bring all of this community together for you guys while we still can here, even though there's some difficulties with a lot going on. On that note, guys, I just wanted to let you know also, I might have to be moving here to Rumble very soon. We just saw Russell Brand the other day also being kicked off of YouTube, making the move now. So if you want to check that out, rumble.com/C, as in channel /Beyond Mystic. I'll bring that in the live chat. Please do go and subscribe there in case we have more disruptions here. This is my third backup channel on YouTube. Not sure I'll be coming back if they don't invite me back here the next time. So we'll see. So anyways, in the meantime, go and subscribe there to my Rumble. And I might have actually a really cool brand new series for you guys here coming up as soon as next week. So if you're interested in that, please do go check it out. Julie, let's get into, well, first of all, Julie, is there anything else you wanted to flag the audience here on that first quatrain, and based on what also Jay was saying before we move to the next one? Go ahead.
I just wanted to add something with what Jay was saying earlier with the time and those events in 2020 that took us out of that matrix timing, if you wish. Like, I felt it personally. I re-thought about how I invested my time and where it was leading me in the end game. So let's say I never was like a big watcher of television, but I was like, oh, okay, if I invest my time in that particular thing, is it going to bring me closer to my long-term goals, let's say? So, and then I started to review all of my time investments, and I was like, oh, I want to learn even more astrology. I want to do that and this and that. And I feel that it's going to get me closer to what I believe is my life mission. So I totally changed the way personally I thought about time and energy investment. And I feel like it's a very common theme around me. Well, not everybody did it, but I feel like it's a very important time management item that talks about this Uranus and Taurus, because Taurus, where the North Node is for 1.5 years, is like, where do you invest your resources? So since we're getting out of that Saturnian timeline, and we're trying to go towards more the Uranian type of life. So being more present in the moment and better investing our resources. So there is a change there, Uranus and Taurus. So we're changing how we're investing all our resources. So once you invest your energy, well, which is about Taurus too. Taurus is about energy and investment. It could be money, it could be time, it could be energy. So I think we all had to review collectively and personally the way we invest those things, and it's part of this big change that we're in, I think.
And more than ever before, people woke up. Oh, go ahead, Joe. Jay, go ahead.
I just want to say that Taurus also is like gardening, cooking, all those things that you're going to need to do to survive what's happening. So that's very interesting.
It's all the old way of producing products, also the traditional way. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it rules food. So we're also changing the way that we produce our food. And getting back to the more traditional way of doing those things.
You guys don't want to eat crickets? We'll get
No.
into the Carl Schwab wet dream there of everybody eating crickets. Jay, let's take a quick side note here. I'm gonna change my little animation on top of you there. You're a big fan of the moon, and I was just, as we're having this conversation about Saturn and time, I did this video a couple of times. Let me see if I can bring up that other screen here for a sec. But I talked about how maybe the moon was a repeater station of sorts for this time matrix that we're in. And as we're breaking the matrix, what does that mean to the moon? We're seeing more and more activity. China just announced now that they're going to be mining this new type of space dust here that they've just found. Jay, how do you bring that into perhaps a recalibration of our relationship with time if in fact the moon was a repeater station for that matrix? What would you say?
Well, I think we need to find a way to spiritually shield ourselves from some of the effects of the moon, because it is the repeater station for Saturn. It has a 29-day cycle. Saturn has a 29-year cycle. It's a fractal of in time of the two rotations, and the moon is it has a deleterious effect on us. It really does. So I think as we go into the next age, we have to find ways to alleviate the power that the moon has over us spiritually. Physically, I'm super interested in the Artemis project. The United States is going back to the moon, they say. There's been nothing but delays, one problem after another. In 1969, we could go to the moon. No problem. Today, we can't go at all. We can't get the technology to go. And they're not even sending men anyway. They're just going there, going to orbit the moon and come back. So again, there's a lot of theater going on around that. The big problem with space travel is something that they don't want to tell you about, but is that it's super dangerous. The radiation outside of our atmosphere is deadly, completely deadly. Even NASA says you need 6 or 2 meters of lead between you and the outside world to shield yourself. So this whole idea that they're going to go to the moon and it's dubious. I hate to say it, but it's a dubious thing, and I think it's just part of their theater. And again, I don't know. I mean, the Chinese went there. They took 3 or 4 photographs, and then their camera broke. So if it did break, I mean, we don't know. And so there's just a lot of weirdness on and about the moon that has always fascinated me. And I go back to something I read in a very rare Freemasonic book that I read like 25 years ago. And basically it said that we came from Sirius long, long time ago, and the moon was our ark. And the moon was our ship that we took, and we parked it in orbit. And it's a bashed in spaceship, you might say. All the meteors keep hitting it.
Okay, you're blowing a lot of minds of a lot of people in the live chat, Jay. That's a whole other episode right there. We'll have you on for sure. And I was just reminded to the audience, Jay and I did this Decoding Kubrick episode where we looked at the Apollo landings. I have to find that because I think it was one of those that we lost during one of these deletion processes. You don't happen to have a copy of that, do you, Jay? You never record what we do, right? Okay. Yeah. Somebody had said to me maybe a year ago, JC, I have your old episodes with Jay Weidner, and I keep trying to reach him to download those episodes back and put them back on for you guys, maybe on Rumble. But wow, that was a fascinating show, Jay. If not, we'll have to do it again because there's a lot there. And specifically now, I think it's important to look at. Okay. We're 48 minutes in. Julie, let's get into the second quatrain here, the 428. Set this up for the audience.
Okay, so there's another one I was guided to look at because I think it pertains to something that's going to happen very soon. It says when Venus will be covered by the sun. So I'm thinking right away of the eclipses we're going to have on October 25th. That will be exactly conjunct or very, very close to be exactly conjunct Venus. They're all going to be at 2 degrees, so Sun, Moon, and Venus. And Venus will be in its superior conjunction, so meaning behind the Sun from our point of view on Earth. So, which totally makes sense with the prediction. So when Venus will be covered by the Sun, under the splendor will be a hidden form. And so there's something there that's like a mystery that will be behind. But I found that amusing that in French, they use the word occult, which they didn't keep in the translation in English. And for me, occult refers to the sign of Scorpio, which this eclipse will be in. So for me, it's another clue that I might be right associating this quatrain to the eclipse on October 25th. And then Mercury will have exposed them to the fire. And in Dolores Cannon's book, they're talking about more of let's say a spiritual translation of that. So Mercury in astrology rules communication, social media, knowledge, learning. So exposed to the light of knowledge, communication, and also social media. So that's my personal adding there. And lastly, it says, by a rumor of war will be affronted. So, and in the book, I'm just going to get there. They're talking about this being an announcement for a ET visitation. And that would cause a lot of social unrest, especially for the countries being at war at the time being.
Isn't that fascinating? Also, the ET component. Cliff High was picking up in his web about data starting last fall that sometime this summer, this year, we would be talking about ETs in a big way. In one of his last videos, he's saying that perhaps here in the unveiling of the big ugly, which is the situation we're in now, that there might be a situation where, we'll call them the bad guys here for a second, might use that old Project Bluebeam type of alien invasion type of scenario to change the narrative on us here. Jay, how first reaction to looking at this slide, and how does that tie in for you?
Well, I mean, it's very interesting, and for sure, I mean, Scorpio is also, right next to the center of the galaxy. And the Cross of Henday is definitely talking about the center of the galaxy and this time period as being very important because it's the Great Cross. So in around 1992, we went at right angles to the center of the galaxy, and for 20 years until 2012, we were in this, and we're still in it. And this is where all the stuff happens whenever we get into one of these crossings. And we won't really get out of this crossing until about 2028 or something like that. And again, the people in charge know all this, and they use it to their advantage. Yeah, no, I think that this quatrain is actually telling us that we're going to actually win, and that that we're going to win in a weird way. It's not going to be the old way; it's going to be a new way.
Well, weird is the operating word because.
Also, I've been told, by the way, that the ETs are going to introduce us to the ETs like within the next 6 months. I've been told by a high-ranking intelligence person.
Wow.
They have been setting the stage all year. They had that first Pentagon report that came out, and now Congress just last month came out to say, hey, these are not man-made, and the threat is increasing exponentially. So they're setting the stage here for that particular announcement, Jay. I agree with you. Julie, as you mentioned, the October 25th eclipse here, I'll bring up that slide from our last show here at the Astro Woo Finance we just recorded the other day. Is there anything else here that ties in perhaps with the Nostradamus prophecy as well that you want to share with the audience, or could they just take a quick screenshot here? What do you want to do?
Yeah, well, I think this whole series of eclipses that we're going to have, so October 25th and then November 8th, they're in the financial axis of Taurus and Scorpio. So of course it has to do with the big transition that we're about to make with, let's say, change to our way of transactioning with money and our financial structure. So I think this is going to be a collapse point of the old financial system, the central banks, which is ruled by Scorpio, and this eclipse is in the sign of Scorpio. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of instability And I feel like people might be very fearful with all the changes that are going to happen for sure, because we're going to be in the midst of this whole transition. So I feel like the link there with the prophecy, because later on we're going to talk about Dolores Cannon interpretation and why they're using Venus to come to Earth or make contact with the Earth, because Venus in astrology represents love. So getting more of this love vibration onto Earth, helping in our spiritual growth, spiritual evolution, not getting caught in the fear factor of this whole transition that I feel like a lot of people are very fearful of the changes that are about to come, but they're inevitable, I think.
Right.
So I feel like there's a great connection between this transition that we're making with the financial system, but also this need for us to have our faith in the universe and also live more in this love vibration.
So is
Yeah.
it possible, Julie, here that this Venus being covered here, we'll get into the interpretation here with Dolores, but we might have, so the reinforcements basically are coming in from Venus here as that particular alignment. We'll get into that, but also maybe the bad guys are going to try to bring this blue beam thing for us to think that they're all enemies as opposed to our friends. So again, all of this is going to be in the air, and we're going to have to use discernment. But explain here the decode here with Dolores and what perhaps that means.
And I read the book over, and they didn't say they're coming from Venus, but they're using the fact that Venus is covered up to align with the Earth, to move towards the Earth. So it says, during the time of troubles, at a point when the sun is between the Earth and Venus, and thus from the Earth's point of view, Venus will appear to be hidden by the sun, there will be a visitation from the watchers. So that's Nostradamus talking through Dolores Cannon's book. A visitation from the watchers, those who have kept an eye on mankind's development. They will approach from the direction of Venus, so they too will be temporarily hidden by the sun, but they will be exposed through the powers of Mercury, that is, through the powers of observation and communication. They will find out more about what it is and who the watchers are when this event takes place. However, as it is to be during the time of troubles, this definite proof that there are others out there in the universe will cause great social unrest and panic in some countries that are particularly involved with wars and such. And then lastly, the planetary influences upon the Earth will be acting to try to bring about, as you say, more spiritual love among mankind. He says this is another reason why the Watchers chose to come back into contact with mankind at this time, for they are trying to help along mankind's spiritual growth in general.
Okay, the Watchers there, Jay, I hear your ears are burning here. So how do you relate this to the Watchers, perhaps the Nephilims, the giants, the people who've disappeared from this planet? Tie that in for the audience from your perspective.
Well, yeah, there's, you'd have to be, very well unread person to not know that all over the earth, people keep meeting beings that are helping us and influencing us.
Mhm.
Akhenaten was walking down the Nile one day, and he looked up and a silver ship was above him, and it told him to start a new religion. So he started a new religion based on what the ship told him to do. I've covered this in many places. There's cults all over the world. President Obama's mom is in a UFO cult in Indonesia. So the ETs have been influencing us for a long time, and I'm one of those people. I believe that they've disarmed all of our nuclear weapons. I think that was one of the things that they were doing, and so I'm not worried about a nuclear war at all. I'm worried about war, but not a nuclear war. And I believe that if they're going to make an appearance, this is the time to do it. We need you now more than ever. We have our leadership in every country is completely out of their minds, and we need something to stir the system up really fast.
Mm-hmm. And how do you connect that to the Watchers? I think you and I had talked about this, maybe in context of the flooding. Do you remember that conversation we had? I'm trying to remember the context of that show. And I remember, I don't know if there was also in the Zechariah Sitchin material where he's talking about these watchers. Um, man, I'm drawing a blank. That's not
Well,
ringing a bell to
the
you?
watchers are the beings in the Book of Enoch. They're
Enoch.
the
Okay.
Book of Enoch, and they watch us, and they probably live on the moon. If you're going to watch the Earth, the moon is where you'd want to be. So, and they watch us, and they observe us, and they nudge us around, and they push us around, and sometimes they take their ships down and get water out of our lakes and steal cows sometimes, and demand sacrifices. And in the past they used to demand sacrifices to them, not human sacrifice but animals, and they would eat them. And yeah, they've been here the entire time, and they've had a huge influence on us. And like I said, if they're going to come, this is now the time. And from what I'm hearing, that's what's going to happen. So everything I'm hearing coincides with what I'm hearing here.
Wow. Okay. Julie, I know you had I forgot to bring up the actual astrological
Yeah.
chart for the first quatrain. Do you want me to go back there, and did you want to point at, or do you want to just leave here with the second one and explain this one here? What do you
Well,
wanna
that
do?
one was for the October 25th eclipse. So you can see in the 8th house, so in Scorpio, we're having the sun, the moon, Venus, and the south node all conjunct into the side of Scorpio. So that's going to be our eclipse on October 25th. And what's kind of interesting about it is that both, sun and moon together, it means a new moon. So that's normal. But the Venus is also at the same degree as the sun and the moon, so 2 degrees. And 2 degrees, according to the degree theory in astrology, relates to the sign of Taurus, which is also about currency and money, which is the opposing sign of this eclipse. So you can see that this eclipse has a lot of themes about the financial system potential collapse. And we're opening up a new chapter on a new moon eclipse, but also it's conjuncting the south node, which talk about purging everything that's been dysfunctional in the Scorpio theme. So issues of power struggles are connected to Scorpio, deep trauma healing from also past lifetimes and current lifetimes, which is Scorpio, and the south node also. So I feel like there's going to be a big, on the upside, a big healing energy available on this eclipse and around the months.
Wow, fascinating. There's somebody in the chat. Monica says, "Hey, JC, Elena Danan, who I've interviewed before in her book. I don't have it in front of me here. We did 2 of her book reviews here on the show. She's been saying she's a contactee, and she's been saying that the Watchers recently came back into our solar system. This leads me to the question, Jay, because yes, in the Book of Enoch we talk about these Watchers, and from what you've described, they're not too pleasant to mankind. I think perhaps here, I'm wondering if Nostradamus was referring to those Watchers, or perhaps a higher frequency bandwidth of Watchers that are not normally here that are now coming back to the solar system, which might explain also why the Vatican was using this the how do you call it, the not the devil's telescope, Lucifer telescope. Yeah. So are they talking about a different band of Watchers, more Guardians of the Galaxies? What do you think, both of you? Go ahead.
What I heard is that that the Watchers were told that they have to come back here and fix what they did, and that's what's going on, and that they've been kind of scolded by whoever their authorities are, and told that what they did here was unforgivable, and that they need to go back and fix it, and that is what they're attempting to do, is what I've been told.
That makes sense. Okay. And guys, yes, the book was A Gift from the Stars, Alien Races, from Elena Danan. Go check out that video is still on my YouTube for now. Julie, anything else you wanted to add to that? The Watchers, that particular book, maybe some other stories on how this perhaps is tying in here?
Yeah, I believe she was talking more recently. She named them the Cedars, that they were like a council of many different races here to help us, not on a physical level, but more on a spiritual level. So I believe she was talking about cedars that were more in contact with the earth recently. So it's hard to validate any of those theories, but it's just information to put out there, I believe.
Okay. Jay, we're already at the hour mark here. There's two things we wanted to talk about also before we leave the audience. This Rudolph Steiner prediction, we'll bring that up, and also this context of Ahriman and the push now towards this AI God new model where you kind of mentioned earlier where we're all synthesized and under one type of control system. Let's get into Rudolph Steiner first and share that with the audience members. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so 100 years ago, or more than 100 years ago, 1920, Rudolph Steiner made a couple of really interesting predictions. He predicted that there would be well, he called it like an inoculation that would appear, and that it would be forced upon everyone, and that it would remove our ability to think spiritually.
Men would eventually inoculate themselves against their soul or something like
Yeah,
that was the quote. Yeah.
essentially gets rid of your soul.
Yeah.
It gets rid of any thought about your soul.
Mhm.
And so Steiner also said, very interestingly, that at the beginning of the third decade of the 21st century, i.e., 2020, that Ahriman would make his first appearance. And Ahriman is the logical extension of Lucifer. So in Steinerian consciousness, you have three kinds of consciousness. You have Christ consciousness, which isn't necessarily Jesus Christ, but it's a consciousness of that you're mostly a spiritual being living in a physical world. You're compassionate towards all living beings, and you try to practice love and that kind of thing. Then there's the Luciferian, and that's not the devil. Luciferian is technology. It's the belief that you can perfect this world through technology. And that's what Luciferian consciousness is. It's not anything evil, although to the Christ consciousness people, it is evil because they know you can't perfect this world, first off, and you certainly can't perfect it through technology. That's the last way you're going to be able to do it. And finally, Steiner said that this Luciferian consciousness, which is a reaction to the Christ consciousness thoughts, will eventually turn into the Ahrimanic forces, and that will be total and complete synthetic control over everything on Earth. And he said this over 100 years ago, that this is the progression that is going to happen unless we stop it. So he started like the Waldorf schools and tried to bring back natural ways to plant food and bring back a more natural way of life in an effort to get in front of the coming Ahrimanic consciousness. And that is exactly what we have to do to get to make sure that the Ahrimanic forces are kept in check. And that is we have to live in Christ consciousness and inside a very vicious world. And we have to forgive people when they're mean to us, and you can't lie, and you can't cheat, and you have to live in a certain way. And it drives the Luciferians and the Ahrimanic people out of their minds, but that's what we have to do. And in this great decentralization, those spiritual values are going to be really, really important.
Yeah.
It pisses them off when you're in the love frequency or the higher frequencies. And this is why I smile a lot on my show. People say, why do you keep giggling? I'm like, well, I'm trying to ward off the attacks of all of these demonic Arameans. Another way to do that, of course, to avoid that particular timeline and consequences is preserving and fighting for our free speech. Julie, what did Nostradamus have to say about that as well? And how does that tie into right now the battles that both Jay, myself, and yourself have been fighting here on these various platforms?
Well, Saturn in Aquarius is all about censorship. So how do you control the population? It's through the information that they're allowed to find, but also to share. So it's all about Aquarius is sharing. Mm-hmm. So I believe he was saying in the interview that Janine did, well, not an interview, but the channeling that Janine did, he said through her that we were going to be confronted with serious censorship issues, and that it had to be very important that we keep sharing this type of information, because that's the core of the war we're in. If people don't get access to this kind of information, then the awakening potential is very dim. Mm-hmm. And if I can add also to what Jay was just saying about Steiner, I believe he also said that these inoculation would attack more the etheric body of human than the physical bodies. So it has to do with your relationship to the stars, to the earth, to your own relationship to the divine in the creation. So to be in contact with the earth, all the cycles of the earth also. So all your divine connection to the earth, which is also allowing you to spiritually evolve. So that's kind of cut off from you because you're stuck in a bubble and you can't communicate with other living divine beings. So that's the way I understood it.
And that's interesting also. Oh, go ahead, Jay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to say what's going on today is very curious because everybody is we're having this gigantic argument. Everybody's in this argument, but everybody is arguing just from the left side of their brain. They've got it all figured out. Everybody's got everything all figured out. They've figured it all out in their left side of their brain, and they're not going to have anyone tell them what to do or what reality is because they've got it all figured out. But and I'm talking about everybody, people on our side, their side, we're all doing it, and we're not putting in any of the right side of our brain into our construction of our debate. And so there's no compassion in the debate. There's no love in the debate. It's just a clash of ideas. And anyone who actually thinks they've got reality figured out is insane. So your reality is moment to moment. And so the whole world is just arguing from the left side of the brain. And it's time for us to take a deep breath and bring in the right side of our brain here and have some compassion for the people on the other side, even if we fervently disagree.
And we have to all come to the conclusion that our reality is in fact transitory. The nature of it, at least, is very transitory. So again, there are big changes for all of us. Guys, if you want to have more of this amazing wisdom and depth of knowledge, please go visit Reality Check here on YouTube. And you can find Jay's work and his books also here on jayweidner.com. Jay, let's talk about a Reality Check here. What's coming up? Any new interviews you want to point to the audience members here who can go and peruse your video and library? What are you excited about? And what are you working on right now on Reality Check with Jay Weidner?
Well, I have a good show coming out on Saturday, The Mystery of the Dropa stones, which are the stones that are found in China that are 12,000 years old. And we're covering a lot of alchemy, European alchemy, and reading from my first book, A Monument to the End of Time, every Wednesday night. I'll be finishing up that book over the next couple of months. And I'm really, what I'm trying to do now, because I'm under threat too, JC too. I just got my first notice that I'm on my way to my first strike. And they're literally treating me like I'm 2 years old. You can never do that again. You can't say that. You can't say this. They're not telling me what I said either. Just telling me that I said it, but I don't know what I said. So, yeah, so I'm on the edge of going to Rumble myself, it looks like. And I don't know. We'll see. YouTube stinks. I'm sorry.
Folks, so in the meantime, yes, please, I just put the link in the live chat for you guys now to make it easy. If you just want to click on this link here, it'll bring you to Reality Check. Please subscribe for now and also follow there in the About section. You'll see the links and notification if Jay actually moves to Rumble also. Jay, do you already have a Rumble channel set up for now or no?
No, I haven't. I'm, I'm a reluctant guy here. I just really I like to be on YouTube because it gets so
like you. I understood that the fight was here on YouTube. This is where we're capturing the most of the souls, and this is why we're still here fighting for this territory. Yeah. But there comes a time here where we're going to change from that particular circumstance of WAR to a rebuilding of the new here. So we might have to also adapt, you and I, Jay, as we continue.
And Janine did say when she was channeling Nostradamus in that video that Nostradamus was saying to us that we had to change and move to other platform where they were not censoring us as quickly as we can to make sure that we maintain the information and the knowledge transfer.
Right. And talking about knowledge and transformation and understanding how all of these astrological bodies influence your life, Julie, what do you have for the audience members here on MaisonJupiter.com as it pertains to them understanding and better charting their course in their own life with the energies from these astrological bodies?
Yeah, so I have on my website, it's a personalized birth chart. It's a digital format. So it's a printable and frameable poster in the color of your choice, and it represents your birth chart. So the planets in their position in the sky at the moment you were born. So that's pretty much your blueprint for your incarnation here on Earth. And it says a lot about you. You're going to find a lot of information there. And it comes with a 15 to 20 pages report explaining your alignment. So I think that's a great start in knowing more about yourself.
Well, there you go, guys. And if you use the coupon code Beyond Mystic, you'll get an extra 10% off. Jay, I'm going to come back to you last here to get last words of wisdom here before we end the show. Julie, before we go also, and I take you off the screen here, let's talk about this Astro Woo Finance we just recorded. Explain the concepts to the audience member here of how we're bridging together both the tarot and the astrology as we're looking into personal finances here moving up for the month of October.
Yeah, so every month we do a general read of all the energies in astrology for the month to come. So we did October. And it's a big month, astrologically speaking, with this eclipse season that's starting and the Saturn-Uranus square and all the shifts in the financial world. So I think it's a great month if you want some more guidance. And also we go through all the 12 signs, so more personal predictions and guidance for your sign and your rising sign. Janine does the tarot cards for the energies, and I go through the birth charts. So It's a great combo.
Very good. So, guys, you can find that at beyondmystic.net/pay-per-view. If you scroll down there, you can do pay-per-view, episode by episode, à la carte, so to speak, to give it a try. And if you like the content there, you can also consider using the Insider Access Pass, which will give you front row seating and priority access to all of this amazing uncensored content. And a big thank you to all of you Insider Access Pass members who make it possible for us to still be out here, even though YouTube is demonetizing our channels and giving us and treating us like children, as Jay says. Jay, last words of wisdom here. Like, I know you've said this many times before, and I'm just going to come on and say it. A lot of people have issue with what we're describing here today because they fall into that fear frequency. And you've been repeating that many times that, no, that's the enemy here. We need to drop out of that fear frequency and get into that self-responsibility. But for that, knowledge is key. Explain to the audience members how they can prepare and take their own control of their lives here as all of these other systems around us are crumbling by necessity of the changes of universe here. We are moving into the age of Aquarius. How would you help them guide through this transition?
First off, there is no such thing as scarcity. So you got to get that out of your head. I have about 27 quarts of sauerkraut that I made. I think it cost me 36 cents, I think, in seeds. I have 300 quarts of tomato sauce. I think that cost me less than $1. So I don't go in for the scarcity stuff anymore. I think that it's a matter of application. And so I think if you think about your surroundings, think about the people that you know, then you can find a way to make your life very, very abundance and freedom, and you have your freedom. And we can't fall for their line about how everything's going away, and it's not going away. It's just changing, and it's in some ways, I think, changing for the better. Because if we're growing our own food, they're not putting glyphosate all over everything. And the water systems will be better, and it's just going to be a much better world. So I'm just asking everyone to not let the Pisceans scare the crap out of you, because that's what they're trying to do right now.
Right. I love it. That's great advice. Jay, hold the line here. I'm going to sign off, but I want to talk to you about scheduling maybe another show after this. So just hold on. Don't hang up. Guys, if you love this content, thank you so much, first of all, for joining us here today. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe here to the backup channel. And stay tuned also next week. Julie will be back with her lovely sister, Sophie, who does tarot. And we do a lot of these mainstream media news decodes using tarot and astrology together. So that's the Divine Feminine Oracle show on Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern. Tonight's show, The Wacky Woo, is canceled. Joe is in Florida and dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Ian. So just after this show here, I'll go ahead and change those posters. So take note of that. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. This was Nostradamus and the Vortex of Time with Mr. Jay Weidner. You can find him at Reality Check here on YouTube. And also with Julie, you can find her at MaisonJupiter.com. I love you guys. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir.
Au revoir.